They rolled their eyes when a 63-year-old veteran asked to run the SEAL qualification course. But by the end of the day, the only sound left in that building was the echo of his last shot, and the silence of every mouth that had mocked him. The smell of gun oil and rubber mats hit Jerome Winslow the second he stepped into the Pine Ridge Tactical Center just outside Abilene, Texas. It was a dry Tuesday afternoon. The kind where the sky looks washed out and the heat bakes everything into stillness. He took a few slow steps forward, letting the heavy door close behind him. He looked like someone who didn't belong, not because of his posture. It was still upright, even at 63, and not because he didn't know what he was doing. He carried himself with quiet confidence. It was the way people looked at him that made it obvious. Or more precisely, the way they didn't. He wore a faded army jacket. The name patch, threadbare, a pair of old tan boots with the soles slightly worn, his hands, strong but aged, bore the scars of a man who'd used them for real work. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. At the front desk, a tall man with a sharp jaw and silver crew cut glanced up from his clipboard. Retired Marine Colonel Richard Harveston had been running this place for the past 6 years. His presence was unmistakable, rigid, critical, and unapologetically blunt. Harveston squinted, lips barely moving as he studied Jerome for a half-second too long. "You lost?" he asked without smiling. Jerome stopped in front of the counter. "No, sir. I'd like to rent a lane." Harveston glanced at the clipboard again. "Rental lanes require certification," he said. "We don't just hand out rifles to tourists." The last word hung in the air like cigarette smoke. The pause afterward wasn't long, but it felt thick. A younger man near the vending machine shifted uncomfortably. One of the range clerks cleared her throat. Jerome kept his voice low. "I'm certified. Served 28 years. Army." Harveston raised an eyebrow but didn't offer a greeting or a thank you. Instead, he reached under the counter and slid a clipboard across. "Sign the waiver. You can have lane 6. Jerome nodded once and took the pen. Near the corner of the room, 2 younger guys sat cleaning their handguns at the prep bench. One of them, Trey Lohman, late 20s, lanky, a bit cocky, nudged his buddy. "What's that guy doing here?" he whispered. The friend shrugged. "Beats me. Probably retired back in the 90s. Trey chuckled under his breath. "Yeah, before half the gear we use even existed." Jerome heard it. He didn't respond. He simply finished signing and handed the clipboard back. Harveston didn't make eye contact. "Standard M4 okay?" "That'll do," Jerome replied. "Targets?" "SEAL qual if you've got it." That made Harveston look up. He stared at Jerome for a moment, then smirked like someone watching a dog try to do math. "You sure?" Jerome met his eyes, calm as still water. "Yeah." Harveston nodded slowly as if playing along. "All right, sir. Lane 6. Don't say I didn't warn you." Jerome took the rifle, his lane card, and walked past a few glances and muffled side comments. He didn't speed up. Didn't slow down either. He'd been in louder rooms. Harsher ones. Ones that reeked of diesel, blood, and burnt sand. This place? It was just noise and paper. He stepped onto the range, paused at the threshold, and took a breath. But behind him, Harveston was already chuckling to one of the clerks. "Let's see if Grandpa can even load the damn thing." Lane 6 was second from the end. Good view of the targets, but just enough distance from the crowd to keep to yourself. Jerome set the M4 gently on the bench like it was something sacred, not rented. He unzipped his soft case and pulled out his own pair of earmuffs, worn smooth where the leather padding had rubbed away. Then, slowly, methodically, he checked the rifle's chamber behind the glass. The range staff watched. They weren't doing it intentionally. Not all of them, but eyes drifted. Whispers rolled. Trey Lohman leaned on the observation rail, chewing the inside of his cheek. "You ever seen someone that old run the SEAL qual?" he asked the guy beside him. "Nah," his friend said, keeping his voice low. "I mean, maybe once. But that was a retired instructor, not some walking off the street." "Guy looks like he should be playing checkers in a park," Trey muttered. Back on the line, Jerome finished setting up. His fingers moved with a quiet rhythm, loading rounds into magazines with a precision born of years. Not just muscle memory. He placed 3 loaded mags in a neat row, adjusted the sling, and pulled the charging handle back in one clean motion. In the adjacent lane, a woman in a sheriff's department polo glanced his way. She had seen that kind of posture before, on people who didn't need to show off. She kept watching. Jerome hadn't come to make noise. He hadn't come to prove anything, but something had cracked open the moment he heard Harveston's voice at the desk. The smugness. The dismissal. He'd tasted it before. Over decades. From instructors who thought they knew better, from officers who never saw combat but carried more medals. From strangers who assumed he couldn't do what they could. But Jerome didn't come to remember them. He came to remember himself. He loaded the first mag, clicked it in, took a breath, and waited. At the monitor station, Gwen, the center's assistant range manager, looked over the setup. Lane 6 wants SEAL Qual, she said, raising an eyebrow. You authorize that. Harveston gave a short nod. Let him run it. He'll tap out halfway through. Should we pull his data? She asked. Nah. Let it upload to the leaderboard. Give the young guns a laugh out on the line. The signal buzzed. Jerome exhaled, brought the M4 to his shoulder, and moved. The first target, a 50-yard silhouette. Snapped backward. .2 shots. Clean. Less than 2 seconds. Trey's eyebrows lifted. Okay. Maybe that was lucky. The next target popped up, moving left to right across a narrow window. Jerome tracked it with barely any wasted motion. Tap. TAP.IT fell. Wait a minute, Gwen muttered, watching the screen. Jerome didn't pause. Each round felt like it came from somewhere older than the room. Not just muscle. Not just memory, but a place that had once depended on precision the way a man depends on breath. 3 targets in under 6 seconds. A flick to the far left. Hit. Shift right. Hit. Reload. He didn't miss. The crowd near the glass started getting thicker. Even the range instructors were walking in. Trey, now silent, stared at the data feed. That's SEAL Phase 2 timing. He mumbled. No way. Harveston leaned in, arms crossed, eyes narrowing at the screen. He didn't say a word, but his jaw clenched. Gwen's voice broke the quiet. Sir, he's on pace to clear the full circuit under SEAL Tier 1. Harveston didn't reply. Inside lane 6, Jerome moved like the air around him was thinner. Like he was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere hotter, somewhere with the hum of choppers in the distance and sand in every fold of his gear. This wasn't about showing off. It was about remembering who he was before the world forgot. But just as the final target flicked up, and Jerome raised his sights again, a deep voice from behind the glass broke the stillness. Who the hell is this guy? Colonel Richard Harveston stood behind the glass like a statue. Rigid arms crossed, shoulder squared, face unmoved, but inside. His pride itched. Badly. He hadn't even wanted this job when it was first offered. Running a tactical center was supposed to be his retirement gig. Easy days, steady pay, and a chance to keep civilians in check. But the problem with power, especially leftover power from a long military career, is that it doesn't fade quietly. It festers. And Harveston wasn't the kind of man who took kindly to being surprised. Especially not by a man like Jerome. Behind him, Gwen tapped at the screen on the wall-mounted monitor. Colonel, he just ran the first sequence in under 30 seconds. That's 3 seconds faster than anyone on the leaderboard. Harveston didn't move. He's just pacing himself early. He'll fade. He's through 9 targets without a miss. Silence. Gwen glanced over. She was mid-40s. Had a degree in criminal justice, and had run the back end of the center longer than Harveston had been managing it. She didn't say it out loud, but the tone in her voice said it for her. You misjudged him. She tried again. You don't recognize the name? Jerome Winslow? Harveston shook his head. Should I? I remember that name from some old training logs. Marksmanship instructor, Fort Huachuca. Worked with special operations. Guy trained half of CNTCOM's recon teams in the late 90s. Harveston's jaw shifted ever so slightly. That was decades ago. Still shooting like it was yesterday, Harveston finally moved. He walked toward the glass and leaned in, peering at Jerome through the small gap between the panels. The older man was reloading smooth. No wasted motion. That same damn calm in every movement. He came in here like a janitor, Harveston muttered. Didn't say a word. He didn't need to, Gwen replied. There was a pause. You think he came here to prove something? Harveston asked. No, she said plainly. I think he came here to remember. Back on the range, Jerome cycled into the kneeling sequence. His knees dropped with precision, back straight. Muzzle steady. Shots landed one after another, each hitting center mass. The tablet that tracked his rounds lit up in real time. Red to green. All green. A few of the younger regulars were now quiet. Trey stepped back from the glass, eyes wide. His friend, Garrett, scratched his head. Dudes? Unreal. No way he's not military, Trey said. I mean, recently, Gwen turned toward them. Army. Retired. Highly trained. More than you think. Trey opened his mouth, thought better of it, and just nodded. Inside lane 6, Jerome hit his final reload. The overhead counter beeped. Last sequence. 3-second interval targets. That meant 1 shot per target, under pressure, with minimal margin for error. He didn't flinch. He didn't adjust. He just moved. Bang. 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 Each target dropped. Even Harveston, arms still crossed, had to admit it. Whoever this man was, he wasn't here playing. He stepped back from the glass and muttered under his breath. We'll see how he handles the speedrun. But Gwen wasn't looking at the colonel anymore. She was watching the monitor. Sir, he's already there. What? He's already running the speed round. Back on the floor, Jerome swept through the final 6-shot drill. A challenge that had broken younger men. The kind of drill that punished hesitation, doubt, or anything less than total focus. He completed it in just over 5 seconds. Target flashes green. Green, green, green. Gwen's mouth parted slightly. Sir, he just tied the top SEAL score. With 3 phases left, Colonel Harveston stared. That leaderboard's not accurate. IT was never recalibrated after the last software update. Gwen gave him a look. You told me last week it was dead on. Harveston didn't respond. Jerome, meanwhile, stepped back from the line and took a breath. Not winded, not sweating. Just focused. He looked like someone who had seen harder days. But just as Gwen reached for the intercom to alert the floor team, something clicked in Harveston's head. And it wasn't curiosity anymore. It was the sudden memory of a name he'd read in a dusty field report 2 decades ago. Jerome stepped out of the firing lane and into the gear-up room, where shooters adjusted vests, swapped barrels, and ran silent drills with dummy rounds. It was cooler here. Quieter. The muffled reports of distant gunfire leaked in from behind the blast-proof door. But inside, the tension was of a different kind. Less noise, more watchful eyes. He laid the M4 gently on the table in front of him and began breaking it down. Bolt carrier out, dust cover snap shut. Everything deliberate. There was no rush. There never had been. Across the room, a man sat watching. Stocky, with a buzz cut and a deep scar running from his chin to the edge of his jaw. He was in his early 50s, wearing a black shirt with a Texas Rangers badge embroidered on the chest. Sean Delgado. Delgado narrowed his eyes as he watched Jerome clean the rifle like it was second nature, not flashy. Not textbook. Just smooth. He rubbed the side of his face, then stood. You mind if I ask where you learned to shoot like that? Delgado said, stepping over. Jerome didn't look up. He was busy scrubbing the bolt with a rag. Nowhere special. He answered. Delgado gave a short laugh. That's not true. I've seen Nowhere Special, and it doesn't look like that. That was surgical, man. Jerome gave a small shrug. Long time ago, Delgado sat on the bench across from him. What was it? Rangers. Recon. Jerome finally looked up, eyes steady. Army marksmanship instructor. I trained recon teams at Fort Huachuca for a while. Delgado leaned back slightly. You're Winslow. Jerome Winslow. Jerome tilted his head, not surprised, but not eager either. Yeah. Delgado let out a slow breath. I thought that name rang a bell. You trained my unit back in '98. Before Kosovo. I was a disaster until your course. Still quote your line about breathe through the fear. Jerome chuckled softly. Didn't think anyone remembered that. I remember, Delgado said. Changed the way I shoot. Maybe the way I think, too. They sat in silence for a moment. Delgado leaned in. That colonel out there. Harveston. You knew he was watching, right? I saw his reflection in the glass. Jerome said. Didn't matter. Delgado cracked a smile. He's been running this place like a private boot camp since he retired. Doesn't think anyone outside the Corps has anything worth teaching. Jerome raised an eyebrow. Everyone thinks they've seen the hardest thing until they haven't, Delgado replied. Jerome nodded slowly and went back to wiping down the rifle. I'm not here to impress anyone. I'm here because I hadn't touched an M4 in a few years. Wanted to feel the weight again. Delgado stuttered him. You didn't come here for recognition? Jerome looked up again. Nope. Just muscle and memory. But just then, the locker room door opened, and Trey Lohman walked in, holding his phone like it had answers. He stopped short when he saw Jerome and Delgado, then walked over with hesitant curiosity. Hey, Trey said, awkward, almost boyish now. I didn't mean anything earlier. I was just talking. Jerome said nothing. Trey cleared his throat. It's just, when you walked in, I didn't think. You didn't think I could shoot? Jerome finished for him. Calm, not angry. Just stating fact. Trey lowered his gaze. Yeah. Delgado raised an eyebrow but stayed quiet, watching. Jerome leaned back slightly. You ever lose someone on your 6 because your shot was half a second late? Trey shook his head. You ever pull a man out of a sandpit with your belt while enemy rounds come from 3 sides? Trey shook his head again. You ever sit in the dark for 12 hours, holding your breath because one sound would get your team killed? No, sir. Then you don't know what skill looks like. Not really. Trey swallowed. No, sir. Jerome's tone softened, but you could. If you respect the craft. If you stop thinking skill comes with age. Or skin. Or swagger. Respect earns skill, skill earns respect. That's how it works. Trey nodded once, quietly. Jerome picked up the now clean bolt carrier group and slid it into place. But before Trey could speak again, the PA system buzzed. Shooter Winslow to the front desk. Colonel Harveston would like a word. Jerome didn't react to the announcement. He simply reassembled the M4, snapped the dust cover shut, and placed the rifle neatly on the bench. His fingers moved without hesitation, but there was something different in the way he stood up, measured. Like a man deciding whether it was worth entertaining a conversation he'd rather avoid. Delgado stood too. You want me to come with? Jerome gave a slight shake of the head. I've talked to men like him before. As he stepped out into the hallway, Trey followed a few paces behind, quiet this time, as if just watching Jerome might teach him something. The corridor smelled faintly of rubber mats and cleaning oil. At the end of it, Harveston stood near the front counter, arms folded behind his back in that too familiar officer stance, like he was still on a base somewhere, holding a clipboard and a grudge. Jerome approached calmly. Mr. Winslow. Harveston said, voice flat. Got a minute? Jerome nodded once, sure. The range had quieted. A few people lingered near the rental wall, pretending to browse. Others watched from the seating area, eyes flicking between Harveston and Jerome like they were waiting for something to go wrong. Harveston spoke low. Your former army fought Huachuca. Trained recon units. Jerome stayed still. That's right. Thought I recognized your name. Took me a minute. You were attached to JSOC support in Iraq. Desert Storm 2. Jerome nodded again. Harveston rubbed his chin. Impressive record, but you've been out a long time. Didn't realize I needed to be current to rent a lane. Jerome replied evenly. Harveston gave a short, forced laugh. You don't. Not if you can shoot like that. There was a silence. Harveston shifted his weight. We don't usually let civilians run the SEAL-Quell without background checks. You ran mine. You handed me the rifle. Another pause. Harveston exhaled slowly through his nose, looking around like he needed to recalibrate his words. You're good. That much is clear. Probably the best I've seen come through here. And I've seen a lot. Jerome stayed quiet, watching him. Harveston cleared his throat. I'd like to offer you something. Jerome raised an eyebrow. A position. Instructor status. Part-time if you want. We are building out a veteran-led core structure. Could use someone with your background. Jerome tilted his head slightly, amused. You offering me a job, Colonel? Harveston straightened. I am. Jerome let the silence stretch. The door buzzed again. Someone else entering the lobby. But nobody turned. The tension now wasn't loud. It was all in posture. Appreciate the offer, Jerome said finally, but I didn't come here for work. Harveston nodded slowly. Still. If you change your mind. I came to shoot, Jerome said, cutting him off without sharpness. Not to be measured. Harveston said nothing. Jerome turned and walked back toward the range. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Everyone had already heard what mattered. But Harveston, even now, couldn't leave it alone. You could do a lot of good here. Winslow, teach these kids discipline. Jerome didn't stop walking. Discipline's not something you teach at a desk. As he disappeared down the corridor, Gwen emerged from the office nearby and passed Harveston, giving him a sideways glance. Told you he wasn't just some walkin'. Harveston rubbed the back of his neck. I was wrong. Back on the range, Jerome returned to lane 6. The monitor still had his score frozen on the screen. Highest recorded in the center's history, and no one dared clear it. He adjusted the ear protection, checked the M4 once more, and loaded a new mag. Behind him, Trey walked over slowly. Mind if I watch a little more? Jerome didn't look back. Sure, just stay quiet. Trey stood behind the glass like a kid at a museum exhibit, watching every movement. The second round began. Jerome dropped into a smooth rhythm. Reloads tighter, timing sharper. No hesitation. It wasn't a man pushing to show off. It was muscle memory taking command. Asterisk, but just as the final shot of the round landed center target, a low voice near the back of the observation area muttered, "He's not just shooting. He's sending a message." By the time Jerome began the final sequence of drills, the observation area behind Lane 6 looked more like a pack seminar than a shooting range. Even those who had come to train were standing aside, watching through the reinforced glass, as if something rare was happening. Something they didn't want to blink and miss. The leaderboard mounted on the wall flickered every time a new score came in. Name after name rolled by. Logan S. Bennett R. Ortiz D. All pushed further down the rankings. At the top. A new one blinked in. J. Winslow 97.8% total accuracy 0 to 42.221. A young staffer leaned closer to the terminal. He just passed Bennett on the multi-target drill? Another murmured. He beat Ortiz by 5 seconds on precision. 5 seconds. Gwen stood with arms folded, watching the stats appear in real time. She didn't say a word, but her face told it all. Respect. Plain and honest. Inside the lane, Jerome never once looked at the numbers. He didn't care. He worked through the drill like he was moving underwater, focused, smooth, intentional. His stance, his reload timing, the way he adjusted for distance without overcompensating. It was all there, like muscle and metal had agreed long ago to trust one another. From the side wall, Harveston watched too. He hadn't gone back to his office. His pride wasn't the only thing that kept him standing there now. His nod even winded. Gwen said beside him. Harveston nodded, his voice low. He's pacing himself. That's even harder. Did you ever train with guys like that? She asked once. He said. In Kandahar. Guy like that doesn't talk much. Doesn't need to. Back inside the booth, Jerome shifted his weight slightly and transitioned to the left side firing stance. A challenge drill offhand. 6 shots. Short window. He raised the M4. Bang. Bang bang, all hits. The sensor screen lit up green on every target. The terminal beeped. Another name dropped off the top 5. Jerome was now ranked number 1 across 4 categories: movement drill, reload speed, close quarters group accuracy, and reaction time. Gwen leaned in. That last one? That was the record held by a 26-year-old out of Camp Pendleton. He's 63, Harveston muttered. How the hell? He's not proving anything, Gwen said quietly. His remembering. Jerome reloaded and turned back toward the final series. Dynamic movement fire. It required pivoting between different angles, simulating hallway turns and door entries. Most shooters had trouble even clearing the drill, let alone scoring high. He ran it clean. No wasted motion. No missed targets. The system processed it. J. Winslow dynamic movement fire. 100% accuracy. 17.93. Dead silence in the room. Harveston looked around. Young instructors who'd once mocked walk-ins were now slack-jawed. Trey was still behind the glass, frozen, as if clapping would ruin it. Even Delgado, watching from the rear of the observation area, exhaled like he'd been holding his breath the whole time. Jerome clicked the safety on, slung the rifle back over his shoulder, and walked off the line. The monitor blinked one last time. J. Winslow. All-time high score. Pine Ridge Tactical Center. No music. No speech. Just a faint buzz from the ventilation unit overhead, and the quiet steps of a man putting a weapon back into its case. He walked back through the prep room. The murmurs followed him, but he ignored them. No swagger. No arrogance. Just steady hands and a straight back. As he packed up, Trey stepped forward. Sir, that was the cleanest run I've ever seen. Ever. Jerome gave a slight smile. Appreciate that. I thought. Trey stopped himself. No. I assumed you weren't. You know. I know what you assumed, Jerome said. I'm sorry. Jerome nodded. Just remember. Assumption's a shortcut that never gets you to the right place. Trey nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. You shoot? Jerome asked. I try. Not like that. Jerome looked him over. Come back tomorrow. I'll give you 2 drills that'll change your grip forever. Trey blinked. Really? You listen. I'll show you. You rush. I walk, but before Trey could answer, Gwen stepped out from behind the desk, walking toward Jerome with something in her hand. A certificate, freshly printed, with a seal at the bottom. Top score, advanced qualification. Jerome stared at the certificate for a second, not reaching for it. His eyes rested on the bold print, top score, advanced qualification. It was meant to feel like a trophy, a badge of honor. But for him, it brought something else. The sharp smell of burned powder faded, replaced by a thick wave of diesel, sweat, and heat. The lights of the indoor range dimmed into a memory of orange sky. Somewhere far off, a generator hummed. In the distance, the pop of gunfire blended with shouts in a language he never learned to speak, but had come to understand all too well that it was Iraq. Near Basra. Spring of 91. Young Jerome crouched behind a Humvee, sand biting at his face. The convoy had taken fire an hour earlier. 3 men down. His squad leader pinned behind a half-top armored truck with no radio contact. And all they had between them, and getting picked off, was Jerome with a borrowed scope and 7 loaded mags. He remembered his hands, how still they were. Not calm. Trained. There's a difference. Lieutenant Banner had whispered through gritted teeth, "If you don't make those shots, we are not getting out of here." Jerome didn't blink. He'd never been in real combat until that day. Training couldn't replicate the weight of it. The noise, the randomness, the blood in your mouth from biting your own cheek just to keep quiet. He'd taken 6 shots, hit 5. Not center mass. Center of the neck. The kind of precision you don't explain. The kind you only learn from knowing every inch of your weapon like a part of your own body. After the 4th shot, the enemy fire slowed. After the 5th, it stopped. By the time support arrived, Jerome was standing, gun slung, hands black with grease and sweat. Banner looked at him with wide eyes. "Where the hell did you learn that?" Jerome had only answered, "Huachuca." Later, back at base, someone handed him a commendation. A piece of paper with his name and some rank acknowledgement. He remembered holding it. He remembered feeling nothing. Because the men they couldn't save? Their names weren't on any certificate. Back in the present, Jerome blinked. The sound of the indoor range returned. The soft clatter of brass underfoot. The murmur of voices. Gwen still stood there holding the certificate. Jerome finally took it with a respectful nod. "Thank you." "You earned it," she said. He tucked it carefully into his bag without looking at it again. Across the room, Harveston hadn't moved. But his expression had asterisk.